I have a real simple question that I've asked 3 times before. That question is, what are we doing? What are we doing? My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Hey, everybody. It's episode 198. 198. Quite a few. More than some, not anywhere near as many as others. But it is The Lip, and another episode is on its way. Very simple question that has no answer, although I struggle with this question over and over and over again. Because, quite literally, I look around and I just see things that are being done by people all over the place. And it's literally the only thing that comes to my mind is, what are we doing? And I don't use that term lightly. I think that it goes to humanity at its very core, sometimes very simple things, other times very major world related issues. How did we get here? What are we doing? But in the grand scheme of things, the questions that I'm going to ask what we're doing about are not necessarily earth changing, but they are hmm, questions nonetheless that I personally would like to have answered. But I do realize that the odds of me actually getting those questions answered are next to zero because the people who are responsible for answering these questions, A, wouldn't want to answer them, or B, are incapable of answering, or my very favorite, C, wouldn't have a clue what the answer is, or even why the question is being asked to begin with. That's just what we're dealing with. And more so, it's what I'm dealing with because, well, in this particular scenario, it is me who is asking the question. I look over my notes real quick and I see that these questions, well, I think there's a real simple answer, but you'll judge for yourself. I can't give you an answer to these questions. Only the people who are doing it, like I said, can answer it, but they just, I seriously question their capability to be able to. It's heartbreaking. It really is. But here comes a question that I can answer, and that is the blank question, the fill in the blank. Very simply, what is the worst part of a windy day? Well, the blank that I'm going to fill in for this question is the worst part is when traffic lights get taken out. Now, granted, I'm recording this episode very, very early in the grand scheme of things. It's not scheduled to be heard by anybody until March 8th, 2025. I'm recording this episode here February 16th, 2025. So there's a little bit of a gap here. But here on March 16th, rather, excuse me, Austin Day, not talking about that right now. Here on February 16th, there was just a tremendous amount of wind in the Philadelphia area. It was just mind blowing, and pretty much if you were a small child and you were outside, you probably would have gotten picked up and taken away. Now, turns out that my power on my house went off for a few minutes and knocked out some clocks, and of course, gonna fix that. But I had to actually go out in this wind probably around 6 o'clock to run an errand, and I came across a couple of traffic lights that were out. And it turns out that a lot of people just don't know how to handle the traffic lights when they're blinking or out, and just an absolute shame. But we'll talk about that a little bit later, I think. Just something that I might add to this show because it seems like it needs to be. So, once again, the question is, what is the worst part about a really windy day? And the blank is filled in by having traffic lights knocked out. As now it is time for the main event. Now, I know my openings and my intros for the last couple of weeks have been a little bit longer, and the shows have been a little bit longer. I don't know how long this one's going to be in particular, but we'll see when we hit the stop button at the end of it. That's the best way to find out how long it's going to be. But now to the question, for the fourth time that I'm asking it, what are we doing? I'm going to start off with that traffic light being taken out. Now, typically speaking, it's should be common knowledge that if you come on a spot that has a traffic light, you obey the light. For some people out there, seemingly driving around to Philadelphia and even in the New Jersey areas from some time, maybe I need to explain how traffic light works. There's three lights on the pole or hanging, and the one on top is red, the one in the middle is yellow, and the one on the bottom is green. Typically, what we're supposed to do is, when it's green, we just drive right on through. When it's yellow, it's letting us know that it's about to turn red. And once that time comes, we have to make a decision on whether or not we should speed up if we're relatively close to the edge of the intersection and go through it, or should we slow down and stop and wait for the light to change once it's red? And of course, red means stop. If the light is no longer functional at an intersection, what we need to do is consider it like a stop sign. That place is now governed by the rules of stop signs, where you get to the stop sign, you stop, you look, you go when it's clear. If it's 4, well, same deal. You stop, you wait, somebody goes, somebody else goes, and so on and so forth. But you have to do it in some sort of orderly fashion. You don't just take everybody who is going in one direction and just plow through the intersection and just run roughshod over everybody else, because in the case of the light being green, well, everybody who is in that direction would then go, and the cross street wouldn't go because their light would be red. Without that red light, and for all intents and purposes, without the green light, there is no definitive stop or go. So it is up to the drivers to actually decide when is an appropriate time for them to go through the intersection. Like I said, I'm recording this way in advance, and today is February 16th, 2025, and I happened to come across a light that was out in an intersection, and people just seem to forget how a stop sign works. Which is funny because if you go just one street further, there's a stop sign on the next area. So it's like they forgot how a stop sign works. And they just sort of use an every man for themselves mentality and just sort of plow through the intersection as if it was no light, no stop sign, no other cross traffic, and they just roll right through it. And the tragic part about it is that light couldn't have been out for more than an hour, hour and a half. So it's not like the people who generally go through that intersection wouldn't recognize the fact that there would be a traffic light there, but they now don't see the shiny red, yellow, or green light, and they just assume, well, I can just go no matter what. Nobody throws caution to the wind, which is what you should do, and consider it a stop sign, but they don't. What are we doing? What are we doing? Do we want to end up getting into a T-bone accident because people can't agree to the simple fact that they want to go so badly through that intersection that they, if the light had been in operation, they wouldn't have been able to go anyway because somebody's got to stop. Somebody's got to stop. This is one of those situations where they say, I know everybody's heard it before, and I'm just going to reiterate it. Um, that expression, if not now, then when? If not me, then who? If not now, then when? If not me, then who? So now is the time that maybe I should think about stopping, and that covers both bases. The now is right now, and the who is absolutely me. I'd probably let 3 or 4 cars go by because, for one, two of them were really confused, and the other one just didn't care. And once again, I reiterate my statement. What are we doing? Now, to elaborate on a different situation, but one that kind of involves the road either way. Again, what are we doing? I understand. I love wearing dark clothing, particularly black. I have a lot of black clothes. And I got a couple other colors, and I wear them whenever I wish. It's good stuff. Now, if I'm just walking across the street from my house to, say, go to the mailbox, there isn't such a big deal for me to wear the black because the area is well lit. There is streetlights on both corners of the road. And even if I'm wearing pitch black, I am very visible walking across the street. However, there are spots where there is much less visibility. And in those places, at night, I would make the concerted effort to not wear dark clothes and just walk down the street, or more importantly, cross the street in those dark clothes. It's just not the way I'm built. I wouldn't do such a thing. However, in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed a very large uptick in people who feel the need to walk in the darkest possible places wearing black clothing. Now, fortunately for them, a weird anomaly happened to me long ago, some 30 years ago. I ended up scratching a cornea in my eye, and for some reason, I have a little bit of sensitivity to light. And because of that, I've been able to see things in the dark a little bit quicker. Between the fact that I have like a pretty good set of peripherals and that quick ability to catch things in the light, I'm real good at seeing deer run across the road in the urban areas, rather the rural areas of New Jersey where I used to come from. I'd see them all the time because I catch a glimpse of their light reflected from their eye. I could just see it from the corner of my eye on either side of the street. I also have a tendency to pick up people who are walking here in Philadelphia, where I try to test myself in order to make sure that my vision is still doing what it's doing. And unfortunately, that other people that are in the car aren't really seeing it. Now, granted, sometimes they're just walking, rather driving right next to me in the car and looking straight ahead, and they don't see what I'm seeing. Fortunately, for the people who are walking in the black clothing, I'm the one who's driving. Turns out that I saw one person in particular who was just strolling down the road in pitch black clothing in what I would almost consider a black hole of night. It was that dark. Now, lucky for them, I noticed them probably using my shot put and discus um, depth perception. I would say somewhere between 60 feet and 80 feet away. Of course, I'm driving about 30 miles an hour when I see this, so I had enough time to slow down and allow that person to cross the street without incident. Of course, my daughter was in the car, and I asked her, "Did you see that person walking across the street?" And she was looking straight ahead, and she's like, "No, I didn't." And that was just one. Then I go and I turn, and lo and behold, here comes another person, seemingly unrelated to the first, because they were so far apart, you could only assume that they were going to different places and coming from different places. But again, the person was wearing pitch black clothing at night. And I caught that person out of the corner of my left eye as they were walking. I just, what are we doing? Why are we just choosing to wear those color clothing at night when we're walking? Then my favorite, the other day, I saw somebody going across the street. Of course, it was the perfect scenario of everything you could possibly do wrong. They were going across the street with the red light at the on the corner. They were walking against the light, and they were wearing pitch black in a relatively dark area, and they were cutting through the crosswalk as I was moving down the road, just about to go, and boom, I stop just probably 15 feet as I see them deciding to cross the street. And I'm just like, why? Why do we need to do this? I mean, at the very least, you could wait like 20 seconds. That's too long. 20 seconds? Because it was about that long that the light turned red and I stopped. I mean, you couldn't wait 20 seconds to cross the street. It was that important. But the sense of urgency that you had wasn't that great because you didn't run across the street. No, you just took your sweet time, almost like Ric Flair walking to the ring. As he walked that aisle, as he strutted himself across the street. That's the same thing that Ric Flair would do to the ring. He would take his sweet time. He'd spin around, make sure everybody saw his giant peacock like robe as he was walking ever so slowly to the ring. And that's pretty much what this person did across the street against the light. What are we doing? What are we doing? The only thing I can think of is that maybe, just maybe, that person in particular had some sort of death wish that they wanted to fulfill, and the best way they could do it was to just take their sweet time and hope somebody would just plow them over in the middle of the road. That's the only thing that I can think of. And the thing that's really a hurt piece about this is I've lived maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes in one direction, 20 minutes less, 15 minutes in the other direction from a Walmart. Now, where does that come into play? It's not because of all the crazy people I see at Walmart. Not this time. I want to just simply talk about the fact that those green and yellow vests and orange vests that you can get, you see construction workers wear, you can buy them at Walmart for like $25. And the luminescence on those vests will easily allow you to be visible if you choose to walk in the street at night. I mean, it's that simple. You just buy that vest, pop it on, people can see you, even when you are walking in the pitch black. It just would make life so much simpler. But we don't want to do that because we want people to ask, what are we doing? I mean, for God's sake, you could even just bring a flashlight or even any other time during the day when people aren't paying any attention crossing the street because they're scrolling on their phone. That would even be better because at least your phone would have some projection of light, even if you didn't use the flashlight. You could at least see the light coming off the phone so that you could see that there is a human being walking across the street. What are we doing? What are we doing? But to make me feel a little bit better, tonight, like I said, I had to go out around 6 o'clock to run an errand. I saw two people. One who had the death wish, wearing completely pitch black, and just walked across the 12 lanes of Roosevelt Boulevard, just sort of hoping for the best, I guess, and survived somehow, or at least I didn't see that they got plowed over. And then another person who was wearing a lot of black, but they had like a light blue shirt that was pulled down just low enough so that you could see it, even though the person was wearing black. You could still see the blue, so you could identify a human being walking across the street. I give that person some serious credit. More specifically, it was a lady. I give that lady credit because I could see her. Everybody could see her clearly. It wasn't like the other person who, like I said, just sort of held their nose and just hoped for the best. And I don't know. I can't understand why people do that. I will never understand, and I'm not going to try. I'm just going to ask that question. What are we doing? Now, I've got another fun one. Whew, boy, what are we doing? These episodes just make me just go crazy. They really do. Um, this one is just totally bizarre. I mean, I thought about making this an episode of story, but it wasn't just one person who did it, like the other ones walking across the street. There were multiple people who happened to be doing the same exact thing, and they were all just as stupid as they could be. Let me see if I can set this up. I'm gonna try to to speak my words and paint a picture of the scenario. Try to follow along with me because I'm going to do my best in order to create this picture so you can see it. Now, let's start off with the fact that I was going to pick my kids up from school. And there isn't a whole lot of room inside the drop off pickup zone. and you have to cross a major highway in order to get to the school's drop off pickup zone. And there's several smaller streets you have to go through with stop signs, and you go across those streets, and then you get to that major road which has a light. Now, at that light, there are two lanes. One that will go straight across to the school, and you can make right turns out of that. And then there's another lane that has an arrow on the ground for you to make left turns. Now, these lanes are like that on one side of the street. Now, the other side of the street, because it's two-way road, two-way lane, the other side has just one road, just one straightaway, and you just go across from the school. Now, in the area where the turn lane is and where you go across the street for the school, there's train tracks above. So there's an overpass. So you have to go under the overpass in order to get to the straightaway and right turn lane and to the left turn lane. I can see it, and I hope that I'm as clear as I can be about this. Now, the scenario that I'm speaking of is just as crazy as it gets. A lot of times I'll leave extra early and I'll get in line to be at the kids' school, and I'll be there and be able to cross the street, and I'll just wait for probably sometimes half an hour for the kids to be dismissed. If I don't go extra early in order to be in position to get across the street as soon as I get there, I get caught up in the traffic of people who are on the opposite side of the street of the school, who then have to essentially wait in a line to cross the street. But the problem is, there's usually so much traffic inside the school's area that there's no space for you to go. So you essentially have to wait on the opposite side of the street until the pickup begins so that the cars can start um, going through, picking up their kids, and starting to leave so that there's room for cars to cross the street and actually get in the line. This particular day, I was late. So I didn't get my half an hour of podcast time while waiting in line. I was across the street waiting for the light to change for about 20 minutes before I could get across the street. Now, remember, the lane that I'm in needs to go straight, or you can turn right. The other lane is specifically set so that you can go left. More than one person is in the line trying to get across the street. Occasionally, there's somebody who wants to go right. But the people who want to go right start to notice that everybody who wants to go straight isn't going anywhere because they can't. So what they'll do is they'll either turn out of the line and do a U-turn and go back the way they came from and get to where they're going another way, or they'll do the stupid thing, which is get out of the line, go straight, cut in front of the people who are going straight, who aren't moving, and drive around the traffic by getting into the lane that turns left and then making a wide right in order to go right. So they go from the left lane that's turning left, and they move all the way to go to make a wide right turn in front of the people who are waiting. Now, sometimes people start beeping and they get aggravated because they want to go right. and everybody else is going straight. So straightaway people just gotta wait. And these people who are behind us, they just need to go right so badly that there's nothing else, no one else that matters. They need to make that right. Now, I've been in the position to see people make that turn a lot, and it's never a great thing. But it's even worse when there's actually cars who are in the lane who are ready to go left, like what happened this day. So it's not a whole lot of space between the left turning lane and the straightaway. But this day, people decided to get out of the line, drive in between the people who are turning left and the people who are staying straight. A car that was right behind me decided to do that. And it goes through. And now I actually trained to drive buses and I have a bit of a proximity. And I know just how much space my vehicle takes because you got to know that when you're driving a bus or really anything so you can get through a tighter spot. You got to know how much space you take up. This one vehicle goes through and it was kind of guessing, but it guessed right. And it just leaned a little bit more to the left and got into that left lane a little bit more. And they were able to get through, which I don't at all advise anybody to do. And they got up to the front between the cars turning left and the cars going straight, and they were able to make the right, and they were gone. Now, a car behind them was equally as ambitious, if not more, because they thought to themselves, you know what? I can do anything you can do, but I can do it better. Now, this person was so wrong. For one, the vehicle that went first was a little skinnier, and they were just enough to the left where they avoided everything that was in the straightaway line where I'm at, and then they moved over just a little bit to the right so that they could clear the people who were on the left. They made it. Now, the car behind them, like I said, was not so wise because, first of all, their car was wider, probably 6 inches wider, easily 3 inches on both sides wider than this other car, which meant that they had, you guessed it, less space. Now remember, this is in an underpass, so there's nowhere for the cars who are on the right to go because there's a sidewalk that probably has, I don't know, probably a 6 inch curb, maybe eight. Pretty high curb by all intents and purposes. It really is. So there's nowhere to go from the right. And the left, there was a car, like I said, there was a car or two. I think it was two cars that were getting ready to turn left. So this wider vehicle decides to go. And what does this person do? They just kept straight ahead there because, well, there was nowhere for it to go to the left in order to avoid the cars that were in the straight lane. So that car proceeds to just sideswipe a car that was two cars ahead of me. Sideswiped it. Now, typically, when somebody gets into an accident, they want to get out of their car and see what is going on. But this person immediately recognized how stupid what they did was, and so they did the stupider thing, and they just kept going. Now, the thing that makes it funny to me is the person who was sideswiped had like a delayed reaction. And that person took the hit, stood outside their car. Now you gotta remember, this is people who were waiting to go straight to get their kids from school. And as that person who hit their car finally got up to the front of the spot and just made that right, the wide right around everybody, they just continued to drive off. But of course, like I said, there was a delayed reaction for the person who got hit. It was almost like they just literally couldn't believe what happened, or they were just, I don't know, in shock at what happened. But probably a delay of maybe 30 seconds, 35 seconds, because the clock changed on my radio screen. So I knew that it had been a little bit of a delay. And then the person gets out of their car and they look at whatever damage was done, because clearly there was some, because you're not going to make that kind of impact. Even though it was in a small spot, it was definitely enough, because the two vehicles collided on the side and it was not like it was a quick boop and go. There was a smack. You could literally see the car bounce to the right from the impact, and the cars were still together. It wasn't like the impact was the hit and then release. Nah, it was hit and then drag. So that person literally scraped the side of this other vehicle from the driver's door all the way to the front of the car. And from my vantage point, that's what I noticed. I can't speak for the car in front of that. I don't think that car got hit, but I for certain know that the one did. And that car was in the wind. So my question is, what are we doing? Are we really in that big a hurry? Because 100 times out of 100, I'm going to go ahead and maybe even say a million times out of a million, if you are at that spot during that time of day, it's a safe assumption that you're probably at that spot at that time of day on a fairly regular basis. And you probably have a good idea that this is where a school is being um, dismissed. And you know pretty much how long the line potentially is. So, what are we doing? You know that there's going to be that issue. Nine times out of, like I said, a million times out of a million, if you in that direction, you know that there's going to be some sort of issue. And what makes it funnier is it's not like that's the only school within half a mile. There's got to be like three of them. So you know there's schools being let out. And you also know that there's a tight space. So just fill me in on this. Maybe it's my 30 years of driving. Maybe it's my, like I said, my training for driving buses. Maybe, maybe it's the fact that I, for 7 years, drove cars in and out of auto shop bays to put them on a lift or an alignment rack. But I can pretty much look at a space and tell whether or not I have room. So my whole thing is you can't tell me that the average person can't look and see that, at the very least, make the question and say, maybe this might be a little close and maybe I don't want to do this. Now, granted, like I said, if you've had experience like I've had with driving in those areas like that, the tight spots, you have a better chance of assessing what the situation is. But if you're not sure, why would you go and do that? And for me, who got saw hit on the side a couple months ago, I was just absolutely outraged when I saw this, and all I could think to myself is, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" I mean, and the fact that that person just kept on going, And the reason why they kept on going, I know why they did that. It's because the person who they hit was trapped. They can't get out. They can't do anything because they're going straight because they're picking up their kid. And they've got to stay in the lane. When the light turns and there's finally room to go, they've got to go so they can get their kid. And I don't know this person. They might have had the same situation that I had at one point in time where I had kids at different schools. And you got to get the one and then you go and get the other. And then you can't sort of take a whole lot of time to do it because you only have so much time to pick up the kids from one place to the other. And you have to make that decision which place is farther away. How long is it going to take me to get to that other spot? So you got to like sort of balance all this out and you got to make a decision which one you're going to go get first. So I don't know if that person had multiple kids at different places. If that were the case, like I said, now you're really stuck because you've got to move from one spot to the next school. And there's no way around it. Like I told you, we're at a light and everyone's going straight, and this person wasn't at the front of the line. They were probably 3 cars back, or they were 2 cars ahead of me. So there was no way to get out because, again, there's people on the left who are turning left. So you can't go anywhere. On the right, you're inside this overpass, but like I said, a 6 to 8 inch curb on the other side. The average car's not going to get over that. So what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. But that jerk who decided to do that was just, what are you doing? What are you doing? Ugh. Finally, I have a sort of a pet peeve, and it's an irritant. It's literally a splinter that's caught in between your pinky toe and your ring toe. It just gets me really badly. Now, I'm gonna no, I'm not gonna pre this. I'm just gonna say I have a difficult time talking to people about sports who don't know anything about sports, or talking to people about cooking who don't know anything about cooking, or you see where I'm going with this. Talking to people about cars who don't know anything about cars. Now, granted, I am not a 5-star Michelin star chef, but I definitely know my way around the kitchen. I was an ASC certified mechanic, and well, I kind of know my way around a car. And I've watched enough sports for many years and participated in plenty of sports where I'm not necessarily going to be able to sit across the table with Chris Berman and discuss baseball and football, but for certain, I can go to a barber shop and talk with anybody about a great many of sports, from curling to hockey to basketball. I'm not like I say, I am not a savant on any of these. On some of those sports, particularly basketball, I don't really have a team. Football, I got a pretty good wide knowledge, I would say. Baseball, I have pretty decent knowledge. I know what's going on. Hockey is probably my second favorite sport, but I think I may have mentioned that I get really, really intense watching hockey games, and I can't really watch that many. It's terrible to put it like that, but I really can't watch hockey that much because of that. Now, I'll play NHL forever. I love it because it's my second favorite sport, it really is. But I just can't. I get too amped up. I become essentially an Eagles fan of hockey for the New Jersey Devils. I go crazy. So I have to just sort of use a little bit of common sense and back down from hockey as much as I love it. But there's nothing more irritating talking to somebody about anything in general, when you know certain things are correct, and they go and talk to you about stuff that ain't right. I mean, WrestleMania 5. I'm using that specifically because I actually, back in the day, way back, when they used to have those things called video rental stores, my mom would rent me videos of wrestling all the time. And one of my favorite ones to get was WrestleMania 5. And I would literally watch that video 3 times in a day for the whole 5 days that I rented it. And I would then bring it back, get another wrestling tape. When that expired, I'd go right back to WrestleMania 5. And then, even still, with the WWE Network and Peacock, I've gone back and probably watched WrestleMania 5 in the last 5 years. I've probably watched it another 15 times. No joke. To the point where I literally know every single move that's going to happen because I've watched it so many times. I will talk to people about wrestling all day long, with the exception of the era that I don't really know that much about, but I've been picking up on it and I've been studying it and know what's going on, so I can still talk to people about it, which is John Cena's Attitude Era. And, well, no, the Ruthless Aggression. I was there for the Attitude Era. Degeneration X. I was there all the way for the Attitude Era. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the Rise of the Rock. But I was not there for Ruthless Aggression. Missed all of Batista, but I've caught up on it. Missed a lot of CM Punk. Worked my way through it. Missed pretty much all of John Cena's major stuff. But the point of this is, I still can talk about it from a perspective of seeing rematches, matches that I've watched over again. Now, it's painful to me when people talk to you about stuff and you would think that they have their doctorate at MIT on a subject when the very first few things they talk to you about are completely 100% not correct. And you're just like, wow, this is not good. I'm listening to you speak, but what you're speaking is not the way that it happened, or that's not a statistic that that individual has, or that's not how you do a brake job. But you're in the middle of talking to the person, you're face to face with them, and all you can do is sort of, I hate to bring reference to this because it's probably one of my least favorite things in the world. Um, but it does make sense for this reference point. Um, Hamilton, the play, the movie, I just can't deal with it. Just, I'm not a musical person to begin with, but Hamilton in particular, it was to me the most overplayed um, musical there ever has been. At least it was in my house. But when it comes to people who don't know what they're talking about, but they just seem like they just so confident that they're sure of it, I just have to go with that one line in that movie. Smile, talk less, smile more. Talk less, smile more. Because I don't want to come off with a superiority complex to the person that I'm talking to who doesn't know what they're talking about. And there comes a point where sometimes when people know that they know things, but you know what they know is not factual, you end up going to a point where you're a hamster on a wheel and you're just running around, and that person just it's going to go on and on and on and on, and there's no way to win because that person just don't get it. And all you can do is just, like I said, revert to Hamilton. Talk less, smile more. And eventually, you just sort of move on to another conversation, preferably with another person altogether, because you're just not going to win trying to survive that conversation. It's just not going to happen. It's one of the worst things in life to me when you end up finding somebody who just doesn't know what they're talking about. Like for me, if I don't know what I'm talking about, I try to do my best not to talk about that subject. Change the subject, or simple enough to say, I really don't know what's going on. Like, I would not go to Neil deGrasse Tyson and talk to him about dark matter. Yeah, I know what a star is, but I am not going to be at his level at all. Maybe if I was to sit down and talk less and smile more, I might learn something from him if he was to talk to me about it. But in the situation where you're talking to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, but they insist they do, there's no point in trying to help them understand that they don't fully know what they're talking about. All you can do is just go with it. And sometimes you get trapped and you're listening to it, and all you want to do is grab the person and shake them and say, stop this now. If somebody were to listen to what you're talking about, they would think that you know what you're doing, and you're only going to get them confused. It is what it is. It really is. And on that note, I'm going to ring the bell on What Are We Doing? Number 4. Main event is over. And I'm going to go directly into the spear of the week. The only person who could possibly be the spear of the week to me has to be that inconsiderate, no proximity alert individual who sideswiped the car under the underpass while I was waiting to go get my kids. Like, all I gotta say is, if I had been 2 minutes earlier, that fool would have hit me. There's no doubt about it, because I'd have been in that spot where that person who just knew they had no space. I'd have been in that place, and that person would have hit me. And I would have just turned into the Red Hulk again, probably super jumped to where they were, ripped open the hood of their car, pulled their entire engine out. Then I would rip off the door, grab them, and beat them to death with the engine and the door. But I'd rather just spear them right through their car, all the way through. That might actually be a more pleasant experience. Spear of the week: the person who sideswiped the car and just drove away while I was waiting for my kids to pick them up from school. All right, here comes a question that I am going to answer. Let's see. Hmm. What is the question? Here's a good one. What's one trait that I have that would make me a terrible boss? Now, to me, this is a very trick question because I've been the boss before. I have. And I think that as far as bosses go, just like coaches, where they say a coach is a player's coach or a coach is a disciplinarian, or they're just a strategy guy, they don't really think about much else but the game. When it comes to being the boss, I have always been favorable to my employees. I have been very good about that. In fact, I've been so good at being a boss who um, literally cares about my employees so much that it almost could be considered a weakness because there have been plenty of times when I was in situations where I was the boss at either the auto shop or at Wawa, and I made up my mind real quick when I was a manager at Wawa that this is one of the ultimate things that I would always do. Beyond anything else, my management style came to these simple points. I would never do anything, I would never ask anybody to do anything that they hadn't seen me do first, whether they're a new person or an old person. Every new person saw me do every single thing that I would ask them to do. When I was working at Wawa, they saw me take out the trash. They saw me sweep the floor. They saw me fill the cooler. They saw me make hoagie. They saw me make coffee. They saw me do everything. In the shop, the people who knew when I was a boss, they saw me do brake jobs. They saw me do oil changes. They saw me take out trash. They saw me um, plug tires. They saw me do all that stuff. Now, with the exception of the master tech, they were just better than me. And by the time that I was an assistant manager in a store, there was no master techs anywhere near where I was working. So the people who I worked with knew that I could do everything that they could. And I always made preference to make sure that I had a situation where I said that the customer was not always right. And I would always start off by listening to any sides when there was a problem, and I would immediately lean towards my employee being the person who was in the right. And then they would have to prove to me as a customer that they were actually right. Most of the time, they weren't. Just saying. But I also had a tendency when I was in the shop to say that I was the shop Lorax. I speak for the techs. I said that a lot. And there was plenty of jobs that I took in order to make my guys money. And there was jobs that I wouldn't take because it would get my mechanic caught up in something that would have been more time for them to fix and more difficult for them to fix than it was worth. And it would have just been easier for them to do three brake jobs instead of something else that was more painstakingly complex that would have taken up all day. So I'm trying to make them money. So one trait that I had that would make me a terrible boss, not a bad boss, but a terrible boss. I mean, heck, this is difficult because I also was the guy who had a policy personally that anybody who worked underneath me didn't necessarily have to notice, but it was what I did. I told the other managers, but I didn't actually tell my employees this. Anyone who worked under me, when it was time to leave, they left first. I always made sure that everybody who I worked with was gone before I left. We could leave at the same time, but I would still walk out the door last. Or if there was an issue, they would go. If they were doing something extra, I would stay. And till they were done, I wouldn't go anywhere. Loyal to a fault to my employer. And it got tremendous results. The people who I was loyal to were loyal to me, and they did everything I needed them to do. And in turn, if they asked me anything, I would go out of my way to make sure that I reciprocated because they worked hard for me. What would make me a terrible boss? Hmm. Always fight with the people who were underneath me. Um, mm, oof. This is much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. This segment is rough. Um, mm, trait make a terrible boss. Um, well, I guess this would have to be it. And it would depend upon how you look at it, but it's the only thing that I might consider to be a trait that would make me bad at certain points. I've had to experience this a few times, maybe three, four employees between auto shops and Wawa. I would rather have less people and get something done than have people who were not cooperating with my vision and take uh, take up too much time. I'd rather let people go who were isn't even bad. I mean, but it's the only thing I can think of. I would rather work short with a group of people that I can work with than have a full staff of people who are going to mess around. That's the only thing I can think of. That's it. That would be my number one weakness. And that would make me a terrible boss because the person who is not holding their weight, I guess I would tell them, as long as you can hold your weight, you're good. But as soon as you can't, and I would rather not work with you. I guess that could be it. I would rather work short, yeah, than a full staff that doesn't work with me. I guess that's the only thing I can think of. I've sent many people home. Well, I said only four, at least four people that were just not pulling their weight, and I'd have other people busting their butt. I would rather have the people who are really fighting to get the things done, not help them out and get rid of somebody who is not pulling their weight. I may have made mention to one of my favorite explanations of that when I moved from one auto shop to the other in Mavis, where I walked through the door and I saw two guys who were just terrible. One in particular was really bad, and he thought that he was going to just continue to do what he was going to do. And this is when I transferred from one shop to the next, and I immediately identified him as a problem, and he was gone 3 days later because I couldn't work with him. That was probably the example of it. I don't know. So the other people who were there saw that I'm not going to tolerate that sort of nonsense. If we can get the work done, make some money together, we're going to be good. I'd rather have that person not there so that we can make money together. I guess if there's anything that would be close, that would have to be it. Yeah, I think that was it. That's the question that I have for myself today. But now that it is now the 17th of February, it's now reached midnight as I'm recording, I'm going to go ahead and start shutting the show down a little bit. Join us. There's room for one more person every time with the Lip Facebook group. There's always room for one more. You can check me out at Philip Henderson 5102 on Instagram. Like and subscribe right here, right now, to the YouTube channel, which is at Phil the Lip. I'm out there on TikTok and X. Shouldn't be too hard to find. But the most interesting thing that I've got to tell you is the words of wisdom. I'm actually very excited about this because my words of wisdom today fit with this episode of what are we doing? Because these people just do all kinds of things that are just mind blowing. And I have a shirt that is perfect words of wisdom for all these people. When I see somebody running across the street at night in black, when I look at somebody sideswiping somebody's car and just keep going, when I hear people who don't know what they're talking about, but they still insist on being a near expert or very knowledgeable about the subject, my advice to all of them is I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it. That's the answer to the question of what are we doing? It's probably going to be the answer for every what are we doing from this point forward. I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you. That's it. That's all I got. Till next show, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.